Yo. Wah. Welcome to another episode of The Hype Show with your boy Big J all day, aka the Mighty Big J. Thank you for another episode. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. We definitely appreciate it very much. And if this isn't your first time joining me, I thank you for joining me for another episode. This episode, we're going to talk about the full results from the Week 9 matchups in the NFL here. And then we're going to do a small preview of what Week 10 is looking like. We also like to typically get into each team's schedule down the road after the results of their games. And we're going to also discuss, again, the teams that were on the bye. We can look at what their games are going to be like going forward here. The first game we're going to talk about was the first game of the day this past weekend, November 5th. It was a game that took place in Frankfurt, Germany. The final score was the Kansas City Chiefs defeating the Miami Dolphins by a score of 21-14. Again, this game was considered a home game for the Chiefs, but it took place in Frankfurt, Germany. This game, I watched parts of this game. This game came on pretty early. And one thing that I noticed right off the bat was there was a huge lead for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I figured they would run away with this game. They were up 21-0 at the half, and I just assumed it was going to be one of those situations where they were just going to run away with the game. Miami didn't play very well at the beginning of the game. In the third quarter, Miami did get 2 touchdowns. They did score 14 points, but Kansas City was able to hang on and get the victory. That was definitely one of those things where I honestly thought to myself that Miami might have a shot, but Kansas City, like usual, they just hung on like they typically do. Patrick Mahomes was 20 of 30 for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also rushed the ball 6 times for 24 yards. They only had 93 yards on the ground as a team compared to Miami's 117. Tua Tagovailoa was 21 of 34 for 193 yards and 1 touchdown, no interceptions as well. And as far as running the football here, Isaiah Pacheco was the leading rusher for Kansas City with 16 carries for 66 yards. He didn't find the end zone. Also, as far as catching the football, he didn't have any catches, and he was targeted twice. So typically he gets catches out of the backfield, but he didn't have any for this game. Running the football for Miami, Raheem Mostert, he had 12 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. Jalen Waddle actually had an end-around carry for 12 yards. And Tua Tagovailoa, he ended up carrying the ball 2 times for 7 yards as well. 117 yards in total for Miami on the ground. As far as the receiving stats here for Kansas City, it was pretty balanced. There was nobody that really got off and had a great performance here. Noah Gray, he's actually the backup tight end, and Travis Kelce, he had 3 catches for 34 yards. Wide receiver Sky Moore, 2 catches for 33 yards. Running back Jerick McKinnon, he had 2 catches for 22 yards and a touchdown, actually. And wide receiver Rashee Rice, he had 2 catches for 17 yards and a touchdown as well. Tight end Travis Kelce, he was definitely held in check. He was only targeted 4 times and had 3 catches for 14 yards. It was definitely the weakest game of the season for sure, and one of the weaker efforts of his career. But they still got the win. The win for Kansas City was definitely a defensive play here, certainly. Tyreek Hill, ironically, for Miami, he had 8 catches for 62 yards, but he did have a fumble. Late in the actually second quarter, he was stripped of the ball, and the defenders took the ball and ran it back for a touchdown for Kansas City. So Tyreek Hill coming into the game, this was him playing against his former team. He stated that he was going to give Kansas City that work, quote unquote, but it just didn't really pan out. He did find the end zone, and even though he did have 8 catches for 62 yards, he was targeted 10 times, but he didn't find the end zone. So ultimately, his contributions didn't really give them what they needed as far as a victory. Jalen Waddle had a pretty quiet day. He was targeted next 6 times, but he had 3 catches for 42 yards. The touchdown pass that was thrown by Tua went to wide receiver Cedric Wilson Jr. He had 1 catch for 31 yards, and that was the touchdown that he scored on 5 targets. So it was somewhat of a balanced attack for Miami, but Miami ultimately, at the end of the day, they just still haven't proven to me that they can hang out with the contenders in the conference or in the division. Buffalo did them a solid by losing that game on Sunday night, and we'll talk about that later in the broadcast at Cincinnati, but this was Miami's shot to kind of separate themselves here. They came into the game also 6-2, just like the Chiefs. So this was a chance for them to prove that they were really one of the top teams in the conference, and that didn't happen for them. Patrick Mahomes also had a fumble in this game that he did lose. That was a turnover he did have. He didn't throw an interception, but he did fumble the ball once. And to me, that's just that's just not in his DNA to make mistakes that consistently. And I honestly think they'll clean it up as far as their offense goes here. Their defense is right now second in the league as far as points per game that they're giving up, behind only the Baltimore Ravens. But their offense is currently 12th in the NFL, which is the lowest it's been since Mahomes took over as the starter. So they still have balance as a team. Excuse me. They still have balance as a team. And with their defense playing as good as it has been this season, that's what's kind of keeping Kansas City from losing more games than they have. Again, they've only lost 2 games. The Broncos game about a week and a half ago, and then the game at the beginning of the season to the Lions. So I think they're in good shape. They sit at 7-2 atop of their division. The Los Angeles Chargers, they got a victory last night on Monday Night Football, which we'll talk about to end the broadcast, to improve to 4-4. The Las Vegas Raiders, we'll talk about them as well with their victory over the Giants. They ran over the Giants basically, and they improved to 4-5. The Denver Broncos didn't play this past week. They had a bye week, along with Jacksonville, Detroit, and San Francisco. Those 4 teams didn't play. So Denver still sits at 3-5. Again, Kansas City, I'm not worried about them as a whole. Again, the offense is not as dynamic as it was last season, but the defense is a lot better. So that's what brings the balance of power as far as the Chiefs go. And again, looking at the standings in the AFC, they're 7-2. The Baltimore Ravens also sit at 7-2. The Dolphins lead the AFC West at 6-3 again because of Buffalo's loss to drop to 5-4. And then, after that, things, just kind of balance out. If the playoffs were to start today, if it was a situation where the playoffs had started today, the Kansas City Chiefs would be atop the standings. You would then have Baltimore, Jacksonville, and Miami. And the wild cards, get this, would be Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati, the rest of the AFC North. So you would have an entire division making the playoffs, which is what wild. But those are the better teams right now, record-wise, as we speak here. The Buffalo Bills are 5-4, so they would be out. The Jets are 4-4, Texans 4-4, Chargers 4-4. Those teams would be out if that were to have happened. So the AFC North, I said at the beginning of the season, that would be the toughest division, and that's what we're looking at right now. They're the toughest division, not just in the AFC, but in all of football. So, in my opinion, things are going to shake themselves out in that division. But right now, to me, Kansas City is still the best team in the AFC, followed by Buffalo, and then Jacksonville would be next for me. I would put Jacksonville just ahead of Miami. I like Miami's offense, but Miami just hasn't proven they can beat those teams yet. Whereas Jacksonville, they got a couple of huge victories already, and they did all those victories within a certain span of time. So I have much more confidence in Jacksonville than I would Buffalo or Miami at this point here. Looking ahead to the schedule for the Kansas City Chiefs, this coming Sunday or this coming weekend, they have a bye week. They do not have a game that's coming up. They're one of the 4 teams that has a bye for week 10. But Monday Night Football that following week, they'll be hosting the Philadelphia Eagles on November 20th on ABC. 6 days later, they're at the Las Vegas Raiders, November 26th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They're at the Green Bay Packers, December 3rd, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. Then the following week, they're home against the Buffalo Bills, at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're at New England, for Monday Night Football. That's going to be taking place at December 18th. 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. So after their bye week, they immediately, host the Philadelphia Eagles. That's going to be a fun game. At the Raiders is going to have a different feel to it now that the Raiders have transitioned from Josh McDaniels as their coach. They have a different feel to them with him gone. And I genuinely that doesn't surprise me. I genuinely thought that he was the reason why this team was frustrated and didn't look as good as they did. I just don't think it had to do anything to do with just the team being awful. They have guys in certain positions on the team. They have talent on that roster. Josh McDaniels just doesn't connect well. He doesn't know how to get his guys to follow his lead, and he just doesn't know how to really be a leader of men. He rubs people the wrong way because he thinks he is Bill Belichick, in my opinion. And he hasn't really done anything to prove that he deserves to be a head coach in this league. So I expect Kansas City and the Raiders to be a slugfest. Kind of like Denver. Kansas City split with Denver. They won their home game, and it wasn't very pretty. And then when they came to Denver, played a solid defense and gave it to them and had Patrick Mahomes looking the worst he's looked in a long time. I expect similar between them and the Raiders. I think they'll win one, and I think they'll lose one. They've already beaten the Chargers, and they don't play the Chargers again till the end of the season, the very final week. So that kind of just depends on where they are in the standings. If they're like confirmed to be the number one seed, they may not play guys, and so that game may be inconsequential. But as far as the Raiders games they got coming up in the next 6-7 weeks, those are going to be interesting for sure. At Green Bay, I think they can win that game. The beginning of December, I'm sure it'll be cold that night. Just a matter if there'll be any kind of precipitation or any kind of snow on the ground. Home against Buffalo, I think they can take that game too. We'll have official predictions as we get further out into the season and just kind of see how things shake out. But me personally, again, the Chiefs are fine until further notice. I don't have any worries about where they stand right now. The Dolphins, I have worries about because I just don't, again, know if they're going to be one of the elite teams in the AFC. They lead their division, but Buffalo, New England, and New York all losing over the weekend is what helped kind of aid them in a sense because they didn't really do what I thought they would do against Kansas City. I thought it would be a better game, but that's kind of how it goes. The Dolphins are home against the Las Vegas Raiders here this Sunday, the 1 p.m. Eastern, the 19th here. Then they're at the New York Jets for the game on Black Friday on the November 24th at 3 p.m. Eastern. That's going to be the first Black Friday game in NFL history. They typically have their 2-3 games on Thanksgiving, and then they carry the rest of the games out on that following Sunday and Monday. So we're actually going to get 4 days of football within that 5-day period, which we typically don't get. So that'll be fun. That following week, the Dolphins are at the Washington Commanders, December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They have a game at home against the Titans for Monday Night Football, December the 11th. That game will take place on ESPN. Then that following Sunday, they're home against the New York Jets, 1 p.m. Eastern, December 17th on CBS. So the Dolphins, like the Chiefs, they're going into a bye week as well. And then they have 5 games after that I'm looking at. They play the Jets twice within that 5-game period. The Jets, we'll talk about them and their loss last night to the Chargers on Monday Night Football. The Jets, as I stated in the season, they've been very up and down. They've had moments where they look pretty good, and they looked pretty solid coming into last night, but the Chargers were just a better team and dominated them on both sides of the ball. Interestingly enough, a punt return for a touchdown is what got the Chargers scoring started. And again, we'll get into that game later, but the Jets, to me, lost in all phases of the football against the Chargers last night. So what Jets team will we see come the 24th when they do go to toe with the Dolphins? Because they're going to probably still be sticking with Zach Wilson at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is hinting that he wants to come back in a few weeks, but I don't see that happening. I just don't. I've never torn an Achilles, thank God, but based on what I've heard and seen from other athletes and other players that have torn that Achilles, it's not fun. I know people that don't even play pro sports that have torn their Achilles, and it's just not easy. So the idea of Aaron Rodgers playing with the Jets this season, I just don't see that happening. It would take a lot for me to believe that. But over the course of the 5 games that the Dolphins have after their bye week with the Jets playing twice, I feel like it'll be a similar scenario with Kansas City and Vegas as I was just talking about with the Raiders. I could see them splitting, winning one of those games and losing one of those games because the Jets and Dolphins obviously see each other twice a year and they know each other really well. As far as the Raiders game on Sunday, that's going to be very interesting because the Raiders are traveling to see them. I think that'll make it in their favor. I'll have an official prediction on Sunday, but I'm taking the Dolphins at this time. The Tennessee Titans game following that Washington game where they're at Washington, that's going to be interesting too because Tennessee has announced that Will Levis is going to be their starter going forward at quarterback, which I kind of predicted that would happen because Ryan Tannehill, he's just never been that guy. And with you having 2 young quarterbacks behind him, you got to see which one you want to go with and then which one is going to be behind him. So Ryan Tannehill's probably gone from the Titans after this year. And at that time here, Will Levis will have a few more games under his belt. So that'll be pretty interesting too. But based on what I'm seeing with the Dolphins, they could be possibly 3-2 over the next 5 games. It'll just be a matter of them playing consistent football and them showing up when the Titans, pun intended, get in their way. Because they do have the Titans in a few weeks, about a month or so from now. But yeah, the Dolphins, the tough games that they've had so far at Buffalo, at Philadelphia, and Germany against Kansas City, those were the toughest games on the schedule. They didn't get the job done. The teams that they've beaten are all under 500 teams and are most likely not making the playoffs. So the Dolphins are going to have to do more to show me that they're a contender. Because again, my top 3 in the AFC right now is Kansas City, Baltimore, Jacksonville, in that order. Kansas City, Baltimore, Jacksonville, until further notice, unless something else happens. Moving on to the other games in the schedule, that was an early game that took place in the day because of the fact that they were in Germany. That game took place at 9:30 a.m. Eastern this past Sunday. The rest of these games took place to start the day at the 1 p.m. Eastern slate. The Minnesota Vikings traveled to Atlanta to face the Falcons, and they were able to get the victory by a final score of 31-28. This game was incredibly interesting to me because for the Minnesota Vikings, they lost Kirk Cousins last week to a season-ending Achilles tear, and he's out for the rest of the year. So during the week, the Minnesota Vikings traded for Joshua Dobbs from the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, he's going to be actually starting this Sunday, so he's back and ready to go. And the rookie Clayton Tune is probably going to back him up. He played this past Sunday, and the Cardinals got obliterated. We'll talk about that game here later in the broadcast, but Arizona didn't look good. And so Kyler Murray's going to be back for them. Clayton Tune is the rookie. He's going to be the backup. So Joshua Dobbs was the odd man out in a sense. So Minnesota jumped on that and took him for a draft pick. And without having any practice or real reps with his team, he came in right away and led this team to victory. Now, they did start Jaren Hall, the rookie. He was 5 of 6 for 78 yards, but he ended up leaving the game with a concussion and was placed in concussion protocol. He's actually not even going to be available for Week 10 against the Saints coming up. So that means that Joshua Dobbs is going to get the start again. Jaren Hall, he had been in the system. He's the rookie that was drafted in the 5th round out of BYU. He had been in the system and was getting reps in practice, but he hadn't seen any game action until this game, and he was actually doing pretty well. But unfortunately, with concussions, you got to treat those a certain way. But Jaren Hall, who it remains to be seen what he'll be, and it's kind of remaining to be seen what the quarterback room is going to look like here when you have Joshua Dobbs starting. That's going to be very interesting here. Dobbs was 20 of 30 for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also rushed the ball 7 times for 66 yards and got a rushing touchdown as well. So we had 3 total touchdowns and was also the leading rusher. Alexander Mattison had 16 carries for 44 yards, but he didn't find the end zone. And he actually found the end zone catching the ball. He had 2 catches for 49 yards. So, I mean, there was actually a 2-yard slant touchdown that was thrown by him to Dobbs. They got him that touchdown in the third quarter. As a team, they ran the ball for 146 yards compared to Atlanta's 110. Bijan Robinson carried the ball 11 times for 51 yards for Atlanta. He also had 2 catches for 8 yards. Taylor Heinicke got the start for Atlanta, taking over for Desmond Ridder. They benched him this past week, so they brought Heinicke in, and he was 21 of 38 for 268 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. So he also had 3 rushes for 20 yards. This team got their touchdown on the ground from Tyler Algier. He had 12 carries for 39 yards and a touchdown. So again, 110 yards rushing the ground. It's a pretty balanced ground attack from each team. As far as receiving statistics, tight end Jonnu Smith had 5 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown on 6 targets. Their other tight end, Kyle Pitts, had 4 catches for 56 yards, and wide receiver Mac Hollins had 3 catches for 36 yards on all 3 of his targets. Wide receiver Kadarel Hodge, he also had 6 catches for 60 yards. So can't forget about him. He was targeted 6 times and had 3 catches for 60 yards. So can't forget about him either. He also contributed on the receiving end for them as well. For Minnesota, tight end TJ Hockenson had 7 catches for 69 yards on 12 targets, but didn't find the end zone. Wide receiver Jordan Addison had 5 catches for 52 yards. And KJ Osborne, he ended up with 2 catches for 17 yards before leaving the game with a concussion. He also left with a concussion as well. And he's going to be in concussion protocol this week too. He probably may not be available for the Saints either. But we'll just have to see and monitor that on a day-to-day basis. But he left the game early for Atlanta and didn't return because of the concussion as well. So 2 concussions, unfortunately, that they're dealing with on offense. The Minnesota Vikings, to me, they're back in the mix. It's just kind of wild to me that they're in it because with Kirk Cousins going down for the season, there was a lot of talk that this may be it for them as far as doing anything, but since they started 1-4, they've won 4 games in a row. So they're definitely not out of it by any means, and they've definitely got themselves back in a good spot. So when I was talking about the NFC North, I honestly thought it'd be a situation where Detroit would kind of run away with it, but Minnesota is definitely making things interesting. Again, Detroit had a bye week this past week, so they sit at 6-2. Minnesota is 5-4, and they're now a game and a half behind Detroit, so they're right there. Again, they play the Saints this Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. And so we'll just have to see how that shakes out and see what they do with that game. Green Bay is sitting at 3-5, and the Chicago Bears are at the bottom of the division at 2-7. The Vikings are at the Denver Broncos on November 19th, 8:20 p.m. Eastern for Sunday Night Football. Then they're hosting the Chicago Bears the following week for Monday Night Football, November 27th, before they head into their bye week. December 10th, they're then at the Las Vegas Raiders, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then the following week, they're at the Cincinnati Bengals, December 17th. And that game, the time is to be determined. The time and network is saying to be determined at the moment. So we'll have more information as that game gets closer. But yeah, the Minnesota Vikings, if they can get a win this coming Sunday, and then they can travel to Denver and get a win on Sunday Night Football, that'll put them in a great position because they'll have the Bears again after that. They were able to get a victory over the Bears without having any substantial contributions on offense and without having Justin Jefferson as well. And Justin Jefferson could be back by that time, so that'll make things even more interesting. So, looking at this 5-game stretch here with the Vikings, it's not out of the realm of possibility of being 4-1. It's just a matter of how hot they stay and who contributes for the team and plays the best football. But Minnesota is not out of it by any means. The Atlanta Falcons, they didn't do themselves any favors in this NFC South because they went into the day tied with the New Orleans Saints at 4-4, and New Orleans Saints got the victory. So that automatically put Atlanta in the second place spot in this division at 4-5. Tampa Bay sits at 3-5. They already had a bye week, and Carolina sits at 1-7. So again, the NFC South is very muddled. I don't even know who's going to win this division, but there is only going to be one team that comes out of the division as far as a playoff spot. That's what I expect to happen. Whoever it may be, New Orleans, Atlanta, Tampa, maybe. We'll just have to see. The only team that I don't see winning it is Carolina. Again, they're the only team that I see playing for a draft pick. And at 1-7, it's just evident to me that they need pieces everywhere. So Carolina is not a factor in this division, but with New Orleans, Atlanta, and Tampa, this is definitely a week-to-week thing. Arizona, the Atlanta Falcons are at the Arizona Cardinals this Sunday at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they head into their bye week, Week 11. Week 12, they're home against the New Orleans Saints, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're at the Jets December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well, before returning home to host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers December 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're at the Carolina Panthers December 17th with the time and network to be determined. So Atlanta, not sure how to call it because week to week they show that they can be all right, and then week to week they show that they have moments where they're just not a good football team. They haven't even been blown out this season by anybody. Jacksonville beat them 23-7 back in week 4, so I guess you can consider that a blowout. And Detroit also beat them 20-6, but they don't get beat by like 30 points or anything crazy like that, like a 70-20 Dolphins over Broncos type game. They just have a tendency to lose games because they make too many mistakes. And that was part of the problem with Desmond Ridder before you inserted Heineke in the lineup. This particular game they lost because it was just a shootout. Minnesota was just the better team that day, and Joshua Dobbs, he really impressed not just the team but a lot of people, and he's definitely shown that he's a pretty solid quarterback. You can plug him in and play ball. So this is the first game Atlanta lost where it wasn't even really the mistakes that doomed them. It was just a shootout, and they just were on the wrong end of the results. So Atlanta 2-3, 3-2, 1-4. You just don't know with this team. You really don't. The next game we're going to talk about here, speaking of Atlanta, the Falcons, this is going to be their next opponent we're going to touch on here on Sunday. The Cleveland Browns hosted the Arizona Cardinals, and it was not pretty. The final score of this game was a final of 27-0, Cleveland Browns. Cleveland was all over this team from the jump. And at Arizona, they barely even got any offense. I just kind of figured this would be that type of game when they traded Joshua Dobbs away. And it was never close. Cleveland was up 13-0 at the half, and they actually scored another touchdown in each quarter after that. The Cardinals are now 1-8 and 0-5 on the road. And Cleveland destroying this team just doesn't surprise me. It's just the simple fact that Cleveland's defense has been amazing all year. And Arizona, despite having Joshua Dobbs prior to this game, they just have too many pieces that they don't have anymore. And this team is just not very good, unfortunately. Deshaun Watson made his return after missing the previous few games with injury. He was 19 of 30 for 219 yards with 2 touchdowns. Conversely, Clayton Tune for Arizona was 11 of 20 for 58 yards and 2 interceptions. This team was only able to muster 99 yards of offense in total because Clayton Tune ran the ball 5 times for 28 of the 41 rushing yards they got. So, not a great performance at all on offense for this team. For Cleveland, Jerome Ford had 20 carries for 44 yards but didn't find the end zone. That went to Kareem Hunt, who had 14 carries for 38 yards. Pierre Strong added another 3 carries for 9 yards. And Deshaun Watson, he also had 3 carries for 22 yards as well. They had 113 yards on the ground as a team. As far as passing the ball for Cleveland, Amari Cooper had 5 catches for 139 yards and a touchdown. Jerome Ford, the running back, he had 5 catches out of the backfield for 33 yards but didn't find the end zone. Tight end David Njoku had 4 catches for 26 yards, and he also had a touchdown as well. And Elijah Moore had 2 catches for 14 yards on both of his targets. So Cleveland just dominated this game from start to finish. There's just not much to really say about this game at all, other than Cleveland is looking strong in that division, and the AFC North as a whole is just a very strong division. Baltimore sits at 7-2 atop the division, but Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati are all sitting at 5-3. And remember, as I stated in the beginning of the broadcast here, if the playoffs were to start today, which it doesn't, the entire AFC North would be in the playoffs. That's how strong that division is. The entire division would be in the playoffs. Baltimore would be the division winner, and the rest of the division would make up the wild cards. That's crazy to me. On the flip side, Arizona, as I stated, they're 1-8, and they sit at the bottom of the NFC West. They also have the worst record in the NFC at this point. San Francisco and Seattle are each tied at 5-3, with Seattle, of course, taking their loss this past weekend. We'll talk about that game here. San Francisco had a bye week, so they're sitting pretty, even though they didn't play. Los Angeles is 3-6, the Los Angeles Rams, and again the Cardinals sit at 1-8. Looking at the schedule for the Browns here, their defense is one of the top 3 defenses in the league. They were number 1 as far as yardage, but they've fallen to number 3 as far as yardage. The Ravens and Chiefs are ahead of them in those categories, but still a top 3 defense, and they're going to show that on a week-to-week basis here. At Baltimore on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox is going to be a great football matchup because, again, this is not only just divisional, but both of these teams are playing really good football. I won't have a prediction for that until Sunday as we get closer to the game, but that one's going to be good. And to make things even sweeter, that following week, the Cleveland Browns are hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. That game is taking place November 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, before they travel to Denver to face the Broncos November 26th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they travel to SoFi Stadium to take on the Los Angeles Rams December 3rd at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before returning home to host the Jacksonville Jaguars December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Cleveland Browns, this next 5-game period is going to truly show what type of team there is. You're going to have 2 AFC North battles back-to-back. You're at Denver, so you're at altitude. I know Denver, we'll have to see what Denver is in a few weeks, but they've kind of gotten their acts together a little bit here lately. The Rams game down the road, that might be a little bit of an easier matchup. Again, these things are week to week. And then home against Jacksonville, that's going to be tough too, because Jacksonville is probably my 3rd best team in the entire AFC right now. These things are fluid and they change week to week, but that's where I have them right now. So Cleveland's games, they aren't going to get any easier. That was probably the easiest game they have on their schedule, was the one they just played with Arizona. So we're definitely going to see what Cleveland is for sure as a team. Like I said, they would be a wild card right now, but beating Baltimore, that's a good way to get some revenge, because week 4 did not go very well for Cleveland. That was 28-3 at home against Baltimore. So traveling to Baltimore and getting that victory is going to be very essential, and I'm sure that's on Cleveland's minds. Home against Pittsburgh, that's going to be a dogfight, regardless of who wins. Those teams, typically, and AFC North teams, whenever they play, they beat each other up for the next team. That's just how it goes. So we'll have these games picked for you on a week-to-week basis, but Cleveland, I wouldn't sleep on Cleveland. They're showing themselves to be a strong team week to week, despite the uncertainty they've had at quarterback. Players that they traded away, Donovan Peoples-Jones, they traded him to the Lions at the trade deadline a week ago. So even with the changes they've had to personnel and the uncertainty at quarterback, they still find ways to win. 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They're home against the Los Angeles Rams November 26th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox before traveling to Pittsburgh to face the Steelers December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They then have a bye week after that, a pretty late bye week in the season. Then they're home against the San Francisco 49ers December 17th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. This team could probably go 3-14 based on the last set of games that they have, based on the 8 games that they have left. They could probably win 2. And that's being generous because, again, this is a bad team. This is going to be a definitely a learning curve for all the personnel involved, the coaches, the players, everybody. Even with getting Kyler Murray back, they just don't have a lot of pieces on the team. He may jumpstart the offense a little bit, but not enough to be a contender. So, like I said, and I keep saying, Arizona, they're going to be picking high in the 2024 draft. That's basically where they're at right now. There's nothing to indicate that they're going to do anything or bounce back. So that's how that's going for them. Switching gears to the next game we're going to talk about another NFC matchup that took place here as the Green Bay Packers hosted the Los Angeles Rams, and they were able to get the victory by a final of 20-3. The Packers snapped their 4-game losing streak here. They had lost 4 games in a row prior to this game, so definitely nice to get back in the win column. Unfortunately for the Rams, they're now a 3-6 football team here. They didn't have Matthew Stafford at quarterback, and they used backup quarterback Brett Rypien. Unfortunately, his day cost him his job, unfortunately. For the Rams, Brett Rypien was 13 of 28 for 130 yards and no touchdowns. He threw an interception, and he was under 50%, obviously, with completion rating, completion of his passes. So the Los Angeles Rams actually released him today, and he's no longer going to be the quarterback for this team here. They brought in Carson Wentz. And with the Rams going into a bye week, that'll give Carson Wentz time to get acclimated to the offense and get the playbook under his belt. But for Brett Rypien, that was unfortunately his last game with the Rams, and they waived him earlier today. So unfortunately, they didn't believe he could get the job done in Matthew Stafford's absence, and that's how it goes. For Green Bay, Jordan Love had one of his best efforts of the season. He was 20 of 26 for 228 yards and a touchdown. He did get sacked 4 times, but it wasn't anything that cost him anything as far as fumbling the football or anything that cost him like a 3rd and out or anything of that nature. So that was good. As far as running the football, the Packers had 184 yards on the ground compared to the Rams' 68. Aaron Jones had 20 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown, and also had 4 receptions for 26 yards. So he had 99 yards of total offense from scrimmage. Emmanuel Wilson had 4 catches for 43 yards. And running back A.J. Dillon, he carried the ball 9 times for 40 yards. Emmanuel Wilson had 4 carries for 43 yards, excuse me. For Los Angeles, the leading rusher was Royce Freeman with 12 carries for 32 yards, but he didn't find the end zone. As far as receiving, Luke Musgrave, he had 3 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown on 4 targets. Wide receiver Dontavian Wicks had 4 catches for 49 yards, but didn't find the end zone. And Christian Watson was only targeted twice, but he did have 1 catch for 37 yards. Puka Nacua, he had 3 catches for 32 yards. Wide receiver Cooper Kupp had 2 catches for 48 yards, and running back Darrell Henderson, he had 2 catches for 16 yards out of the backfield. So, again, very little offense for the Los Angeles Rams. And like I said, Brett Rypien, he had 2 fumbles and actually lost one of them. So, just not a very good day here, turning the football over twice, throwing under 50% completion. Sean McVay will cut you like polyester at a seamstress house if you don't play well. Plain and simple, and that's exactly what happened with him. So, the Green Bay Packers, they improved to 3-5. I discussed the division a little bit ago when we were talking about Minnesota. They still got some work to do. They're still 3 games behind the Detroit Lions and a game and a half behind Minnesota, who's found some sort of a resurgence in a bit with bringing in Joshua Dobbs. So Green Bay, they still got some work to do, in my opinion, but this was a nice way to get back in the win column and improve themselves to 3-5. Looking at the Packers' schedule going forward here, they're home again. They're at the Pittsburgh Steelers here on Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The following week, they host the Los Angeles Chargers, 1 p.m. Eastern, November 19th on Fox before traveling to Detroit for the Thanksgiving Day game. That game actually kicks off the Thanksgiving schedule. 10 days later, they're home against the Kansas City Chiefs for Sunday Night Football, December 3rd on NBC. Then they're at the Giants for Monday Night Football, December 11th, ABC, 8:15 p.m. Eastern. Given how bad the Giants are, I would call that a win for the Packers. I would be surprised if the Giants could beat them. But these next 4 games coming up are pretty difficult for the Packers. At Pittsburgh is going to be a nightmare for Jordan Love. I'm calling that Pittsburgh defense is going to be all over that kid. Pause. That's going to be a rough day for him. The Chargers, home against the Chargers, that might be a little bit easier because you don't have to travel out west. But Justin Herbert, he can slice up that secondary if he gets hot. And then with the Packers having a quick turnaround to play Detroit at Detroit on Thanksgiving, I think Detroit is going to make things rough on them because again, this isn't the same old Detroit Lions. Realistically, I can see the Packers being 2-3 over the next 5 games. Again, that Giants game 5-6 weeks away, that's a victory. But Pittsburgh, Chargers, Lions, Chiefs, all 4 of those teams are trying to get in the playoffs. The Chargers will probably have the toughest time right now, but all 4 of those teams want to get into the playoffs. The Chiefs got Super Bowl aspirations like usual. So this team could be 1-4 over the next 5 to 6 weeks. You know, you have Tampa Bay after that. That's not going to be a gimme either. So Green Bay, they got some work to do. We'll just have to see if they can make it happen over the course of the next 4 to 5 weeks. But you're already a few games in the hole from Detroit. And if Detroit continues to separate themselves any further, these games are going to have less and less meaning because you guys will be already out of it. So we'll just have to see with the Green Bay Packers. But again, they broke a 4-game winning streak after losing pretty much all of October. And so it's nice to get themselves back at it and going again. They already had their bye week too, so no bye weeks coming up for the rest of the season. And just games from here on out for Green Bay. Discussing the Los Angeles Rams, like I said, this team, they to me never were a team that I thought was a contender. They've now lost 3 games in a row. Is Carson Wentz going to help? I don't know. Maybe they can get the most out of him with the offensive schemes that they have and utilize it with the Los Angeles Rams, with McVay uses, but he's already had 3 stops. He spent that time with the Eagles. They won a Super Bowl in spite of him. He spent a year with the Colts. They didn't like him very much. They decided to go ahead and bring in another quarterback and draft Anthony Richardson this past year. And with the Washington Commanders last year, it didn't work out with them either. You know what I mean? They ended up letting him go and going with Sam Howell and Taylor Heinicke for parts of last year. So will it work out for him for the Rams? We'll just have to see. Again, they have a bye week this coming week, so they don't play. They're one of the 4 teams that's out. The following week on November 19th, they host the Seattle Seahawks, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Arizona to face the Cardinals. That game is November 26th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They're home against the Cleveland Browns December 3rd, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox before traveling to Baltimore to face the Ravens on 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're home against the Washington Commanders. That game is taking place December 17th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So as I look at these games, it's hard to calculate them getting a win anytime soon. They surprised the Seahawks to start the season way back in week 1 at Seattle. I called a Seattle win for that, but that was week 1, so we hadn't seen anybody yet. Based on the way Seattle is playing now, I think Seattle is going to get the Rams on Sunday to make it a split. We'll have to see, and I'll have an official prognostication for you, but I could see them beating the Rams here I'm sorry, I could see them losing to Seattle a week from Sunday on the 19th when they get back from that bye. Even though Seattle has a game coming up, I still think they'll get that victory. At Arizona, the Rams may get that one because, the Cardinals going back to them, they're not a good team. After that, though, Cleveland and Baltimore, those 2 defenses are going to make life a living hell for the Rams. And home versus Washington, that could be a victory too, but that's really about all. This team may win 1 or 2 games over the next 5 games in this next 5 to 6 week period, but I just don't see it. I really don't. The Rams are not going to be a good team. And even with all the draft picks they made, they'll probably be making some more. They won't be picking in the first round because of trades that they've made in previous transactions. They won't have a first round pick for a while. But, they're still going to be picking the draft in the second round or later, and they really need some help. It's just a matter of where they decide to pick that's going to be the key. But again, the Rams aren't a contender. They're not as far on the towards the bottom of the totem pole as, say, the Cardinals, but they're just not a contender in my opinion here. The next game we're going to talk about results-wise here, the Washington Commanders traveling to visit the New England Patriots, and they were able to escape Gillette with the victory by a final of 20-17. This game to me was very, very mundane in a sense, but with the Washington Commanders, they didn't really have to do much until they got to the fourth quarter. Once they were able to get those 10 points in the third quarter, it was just a matter of holding them off. And the Patriots actually had a chance late to win to get the game. And Mac Jones threw a late interception to Jartavius Martin of Washington. So that's what got them the victory. The Patriots were actually favored by 3. And I picked Washington to win this game because I genuinely thought to myself, I think Washington will come out with this game close. And I was luckily able to get that one correct because there was just nothing about the Patriots that screamed out that they should have been favored, which I thought was interesting. But I'm not a betting man, so what do I know? Sam Howell for Washington had threw 29 of 45 for 325 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Also carried the ball 5 times for 27 yards. Mac Jones, quarterback for the New England Patriots, was 24 of 44 for 220 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. He also carried the ball 3 times for 3 yards. As far as running the football, it was pretty balanced attack for each team. Washington had 124 yards on the ground. Brian Robinson Jr. led the way with 18 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. Antonio Gibbs had another 6 carries for 34 yards. For New England, Ramondre Stevenson had 9 carries for 87 yards and a touchdown, including a 64-yard run for much of that 87 yards. That basically would mean he had another 8 carries for 23 yards. So without that 64-yard carry, he had a pretty decent day. It was okay. Ezekiel Elliott had 6 carries for 17 yards for the rest of that yardage. So not that great of a day for him. He did have 3 catches for 15 yards on 5 targets, but he didn't find the end zone. For Washington, Terry McLaurin, wide receiver, had 5 catches for 73 yards, but didn't find the end zone. That went to wide receiver Jahan Dotson on 8 targets. He had 4 catches for 69 yards. Byron Pringle, he had another 3 catches for 55 yards. And again, Antonio Gibson with 5 catches for 42 yards. For New England, rookie Demario Douglas had 5 catches for 55 yards on 7 targets, but didn't find the end zone. Wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster had 6 catches for 51 yards, and running back Ramondre Stevenson added another 4 catches for 42 yards out of the backfield. So he did go over 100 as far as yards from scrimmage. Tight end Hunter Henry, he got the touchdown that Mac Jones threw, and he had 4 catches for 39 yards on 7 targets. So Mac Jones was pretty balanced as to where he attacked with the ball. He just didn't get a lot of yardage on offense for that. And of course, that late interception that he threw is what sealed the game. Because again, the Patriots still had a chance to win despite the game being down late in the fourth quarter. They still had a shot to drive and win the game. So the New England Patriots fall to 2-7. They are actually 1-4 at home. That's actually Bill Belichick's worst mark through to start his season in his career coaching. He's having a rough year. The Patriots, like I said, I didn't expect them to be in the mix, and they're slowly but surely falling out of it. The Commanders, however, improved to 4-5 in their division, and they're still hanging tough. Philadelphia leads the way at 8-1. They're heading into a bye week this week. The Dallas Cowboys, they lost to Philadelphia this past weekend to fall to 5-3. With Washington's win, that improved them to 4-5, and the New York Giants, of course, sit at 2-7 at the bottom. So that division is looking like how I thought it would. I felt like last year's New York Giants were a mirage, and they kind of fooled everybody into thinking they were a good team, but I just never really believed in them, even though they got a playoff victory. So congrats to the Commanders to get to keep themselves in the mix and keep themselves in wild card contention. I did discuss the AFC as far as what the playoffs would look like if they started today. On the flip side, when you look at the NFC, for example, if you look at the way things are looking for them, and the NFC, if the playoffs were to start today, you would have Philadelphia, Detroit, the New Orleans Saints, and the San Francisco 49ers as far as leading the division. And then the wild cards would be the Seattle Seahawks, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Minnesota Vikings. So the Minnesota Vikings definitely got themselves in a great position because if the playoffs were to start today, they would have the 7th seed, and they would end up facing the Detroit Lions, with Philadelphia being the 1 seed at home. So this is one of those things where the NFC, outside of Arizona, Carolina, Chicago, and the New York Giants, and then the Rams and Packers possibly, those teams at the top are all kind of muddled, and they're still in the mix to do great things. So I know there's still half a season left, but there's just some teams that feel like they're out of it. There's more football to be played, but some teams just feel like they're out of it. But in this case here, the reason why I brought that up is because the for me, the Washington Commanders, they've always kind of been around, but they just fall short of getting into the playoffs. So for them, it's just a matter of being consistent and winning. They don't have to worry about the Giants or anything, but Philadelphia and Dallas, as long as they stay ahead of them and keep winning games, they're going to fall short again one more time. So the Washington Commanders schedule, looking at their schedule here, they're at the Seattle Seahawks this Sunday at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they host the New York Giants, 1 p.m. Eastern, November 19th on Fox. The Giants beat them a couple weeks ago, 14-7. So I'm sure Washington would love to get that one back for sure. Again, they're at the Dallas Cowboys for Thanksgiving. That's the second day of the game, 4:30 Eastern on CBS. Then 10 days later, they're home for the Miami Dolphins, December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they head into their bye week, week 13. Week 14, they're at the Los Angeles Rams, December 17th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So naturally, when you look at some of these games, they're going to scream out loss. But for Washington, surprisingly, I could see them over this 5 to 6 week period with that bye week thrown in there. I could see them being 3-2. I could see them being a 3-2 football team because the Giants and the Rams, those look like wins to me. At Seattle and at Dallas is going to be tough. But the home game against Miami, because it's not going to be in Miami, I think that could be shift things a little. That game is still weeks away, so I don't have a prediction yet. But they have a shot. There's just some things I have to see with Miami and Washington to kind of determine who's going to win that. But Washington, they could be in the mix. You know, the division they're in is probably the second toughest behind the AFC North. So we'll just have to see how things shake out with the Cowboys, with the Eagles, and with the Giants as well. The Giants, again, I don't see them being a factor because they lost Daniel Jones for the season to a torn ACL. He had already had a neck injury to cause him to miss a few games, but with him having the torn ACL and him being out for the season, and with them also placing their backup quarterback Tyrod Taylor on IR, you're going to be depending on Tommy DeVito at quarterback for the Giants. He's not going to get it done for you. In 2 games, he has 90 passing yards. Nah, son, that's not going to work. So I can see the Giants losing that game to Washington, even though it's a couple weeks away. But we'll just have to see with Washington. Like I said, I could see them being 3-2. The Patriots, on the flip side, looking at how things are going to be for them, hey, I called this at the beginning of the year, and it's just going to get rough for them. Now, they are heading to Germany to place the Indianapolis Colts on this coming Sunday, 9:30 Eastern on NFL Network before they head into their bye week. Following that, they're at the New York Giants at 1 p.m. Eastern on November 26th on Fox. They're home against the Los Angeles Chargers December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Pittsburgh for a Thursday night game December 7th on Prime Video. So, yeah. The Patriots have lost 5 of their last 6 games. And, yeah, that's all you can really say. Bill Belichick's his legacy is somewhat established, but if he keeps having these rough seasons back to back with just being awful, that's going to affect his legacy too because people are going to question whether it was him or whether it was Tom Brady. Based on what we're seeing right now, Tom Brady's legacy is definitely intact because he's retired, but for Belichick, he's got more work to do, plain and simple. So we're going to have to see what New England is, but after the Colts game, they have a bye week and then 4 games after that. I don't know where the win comes from. It could be at the Giants because even with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, you still got the better quarterback than Tommy DeVito. Because again, Tyrod Taylor's on IR, so he won't be available for that game because he has to miss a minimum of 4 games. And then Daniel Jones is out for the season. So you're going to be depending on Tommy DeVito and Matt Barkley at quarterback. So the Patriots could win that game because they have enough defensive players to get the job done there, but they could be 1-4 over these next 5 to 6 weeks. I just don't see anything to indicate that they'll be any better unless some opportunity just comes their direction. Another game we're going to talk about here, this is another NFC matchup that took place in the afternoon. The New Orleans Saints hosting the Chicago Bears, and they were able to get the victory by a final of 24-17. 24-17 for the New Orleans Saints. I called that game. I said that they would win it by a touchdown, interestingly enough, and that's exactly what they did. Taysom Hill was the star for the Saints. He I've called him a Swiss Army knife before, but he was very versatile. He threw for a touchdown. He ran the ball 11 times for 52 yards, and he also caught a touchdown with 4 catches for 13 yards. He and Frank Gifford are the only players in the last 90 years, which is crazy to me, for their career to have 20, I think it was 20 passing touchdowns, 20 rushing touchdowns, and 20 receiving touchdowns within a certain amount of time. So that was really crazy for me. The New Orleans Saints had 3 passing touchdowns as a team, with Derek Carr being 25 of 34 for 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. For Chicago, Tyson Bagent stepped in again for Justin Fields, who's out with a dislocated thumb on his throwing hand. Tyson Bagent was 18 of 30 for 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he threw 3 interceptions. So that's definitely what doomed them. And the thing that's crazy is they still only lost by a touchdown. So I mean, I don't know. I just don't think it's a situation where you give up on Tyson Bagent. Again, he is a rookie, and this was his 3rd game. But, those growing pains are going to come. He also ran the ball 8 times for 70 yards, including a 20-yard scamper in the 3rd quarter. So Tyson Bagent, he can really move well also. So with time, he'll get better. And I think Chicago's going to have a decision to make on Justin Fields after this season on whether they want to continue to move forward with him or see if they can do something with Tyson Bagent. It's really going to be a situation where they have to make that decision. But as far as rushing the football, Chicago did lead in that category with 156 yards as a team. Dante Foreman had 20 carries for 83 yards, but he didn't find the end zone. So this team ran the football really well. It's just Tyson Bagent's play is what kind of doomed them in the end. As far as receiving for the New Orleans Saints, Chris Olave led the way with 6 catches for 46 yards and a touchdown. Tight end Juwan Johnson, returning from injury, had 5 catches for 29 yards and a touchdown. Running back Alvin Kamara out of the backfield, he had 9 carries for 26 yards, but he also had 4 catches for 44 yards. And running back Kendra Miller, the rookie out of TCU, he only carried the ball once but didn't get any yards, but he had 1 catch for 31 yards on his only target of the game. Michael Thomas, interestingly enough, for the Saints was targeted once but didn't have any catches. So there was a time where Michael Thomas was the top receiver in the league. He was the guy that you knew was going to get like 130 catches for the season. He was probably your top guy on your fantasy football team, but he hasn't been right since probably about 2020 with the various injuries to a toe, his ankle, things of that nature, and he just hasn't looked the same since. So I definitely missed that Michael Thomas. 2019 Michael Thomas was prime Michael Thomas. He was definitely goated around that time. So kind of tough to see, but nevertheless, the Saints get the victory. For the Bears, they fall to 2-7. Tyson Bagent also fumbled the football, so he had 4 turnovers for himself, and they had 5 as a team because DJ Moore, he had a catch and also fumbled the ball as well. The Bears, they did have a couple of games here in the last couple of weeks or so where they looked like a better team, but after the Sunday night loss to the Chargers last week and the Saints team, that's kind of been washed away. That victory over the Raiders, I feel like that had more to do with a couple of different things. The Bears didn't have any tape on Tyson Bagent because, remember, Justin Fields got hurt in the game previous to that against the Minnesota Vikings. So they didn't have any tape on Tyson Bagent. The Raiders did. And number 2, they're the Raiders. Plain and simple. But these teams the last couple of weeks have been able to study Tyson Bagent and see what he does and see what his tendencies are. And plus, with him being a rookie, undrafted out of Shepherd, there's going to be certain things that he does that rookies do until they get more acclimated to the game or to get rid of certain bad habits. So I kind of expected to see this victory with the Saints here. So it doesn't surprise me very much. The Saints, again, they're in a muddled division along with Atlanta, Tampa, and Carolina. And Carolina, like I said, they're the only team that's not going to be a factor in that division. With Atlanta losing and the Saints winning, that puts them at 5-4 atop of the NFC North. And for the Bears, as I stated, they still sit at the bottom of the NFC North at 2-7. The Saints are in the NFC South, excuse me. They lead the NFC South at 5-4. I'm looking at the Saints' schedule going ahead here. Again, at 5-4, they'll be at the Minnesota Vikings this Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they head into their bye week. They'll be at the Atlanta Falcons November 26, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox following their bye week. Then they host 3 teams in a row. They'll have 3 home games in a row following that. They host the Detroit Lions December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They host the Carolina Panthers December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they host the New York Giants 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox December 17th. So for the Saints, if they can just keep playing that ball and keep playing consistently, they could probably win this division. Because my concerns for Atlanta and Tampa are a lot greater than they are for the Saints. I think for the Saints, it's just been inconsistency because they have won their last 2 games, but they lost their 2 games prior to that. Prior to those 2 games they lost, they blew out the Patriots 34-0. So for me, the Saints, it's just a matter of the consistent play that they can get across the board. If they can get a victory at the Saints before heading into their bye week, that'll have them sitting pretty. They won't be able to get past or anything like that because, like I said, I have question marks about Atlanta, and New Orleans faces Atlanta head-to-head following their bye week. So if they can get a victory and then they can get a victory over Atlanta after their bye week, I think that'll put them in a great spot because the game at the very end of the season against Atlanta, depending on what seeding there are, that game may be inconsequential. So we'll just have to see what the Saints do. But as of right now, they're the better team in the division since Atlanta's already had to make a switch at the quarterback position. I'm going to take the Saints to be the better team in the division. As far as the Chicago Bears, as far as what their schedule is looking like, I've said many times that they're going to be picking at the top of the draft. So it's just going to be a matter of where they're sitting. The Cardinals lead the race for the top spot right now because of how bad their record is, but Chicago will be somewhere in there. This Thursday night, they'll be home against the Carolina Panthers on Prime Video, November 9th, so just in a couple days here. I'll have a prediction for you for that game on Thursday because that game is one of the weaker primetime games we're going to see. The Bears and Panthers, I'm sure when the NFL schedule makers were putting this game on a certain time and certain networks, they had better teams in mind than this. So, yeah, that's going to be a rough game to watch. And maybe we can get some surprises out of it as far as great play, but that game is 2 very mediocre teams that are going to be jostling for draft order. That's what this game is about coming up on Thursday. 10 days later, the Bears are at Detroit for a divisional matchup November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They then travel to Minnesota for another divisional matchup on November 27th for Monday Night Football. They then have a bye week. Then they're home against the Detroit Lions December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they travel to Cleveland December 17th, network and time to be determined. The Chicago Bears, even the Carolina game could be a loss. That game is definitely a pick 'em. And like I said, I'll have a prediction for you on Thursday because neither team is very good. So whoever wins this team is going to be the team that makes less mistakes and plays the best. Neither team is that great though. But with Detroit, Minnesota, bye week, Detroit, that 4-week stretch right there, I could see them being 1-2, possibly. They could split with Detroit, but that's asking a lot, honestly, because Detroit is just not as good or Chicago is just not as good as the Detroit Lions are. The Detroit Lions are clearly the best team in that division. So after this Thursday, at best, this team could be 1-4. They could beat Carolina. But if Carolina finds a way to defeat them, despite not having as good of a record, that wouldn't surprise me. Definitely wouldn't surprise me. The next game we're going to talk about here, as far as the results here, this is the second to last game of the 1 p.m. haul, and then we're going to get to the afternoon games for this past Sunday. The Baltimore Ravens defeated the Seattle Seahawks soundly by a final score of 37-3. This game was never close at any point here. The Seattle Seahawks they only got the 1 field goal in the second quarter, and Baltimore just went nuts on them. I predicted that Baltimore would win this game, and I predicted that Lamar Jackson would have a pretty solid day, but this game was won more behind defense and behind Keaton Mitchell. He was a running back that ran the ball 9 times for 138 yards and a touchdown. Lamar Jackson didn't throw for any touchdowns, and he didn't run for any touchdowns. He had a very average day. But when you're getting contribution from all over the team like that, it's not going to really matter that much, honestly. Excuse me. Now, again, Lamar Jackson was 21 of 26 for 187 yards. Tyler Huntley came in late in the fourth quarter. He was actually 5 of 7 for 38 yards and a touchdown. So that was very interesting. Lamar Huntley, remember, Lamar Jackson missed a large part of towards the end of the season with the knee injury, and Tyler Huntley came in and spelled him and won a couple games down the stretch and even played for him in the wild card game against Cincinnati last year. So Tyler Huntley is capable. He was on the Pro Bowl team last year too. I mean, Pro Bowls don't mean the same as what they used to, but nevertheless, that's an honor that happens every year that football pays attention to. Plain and simple. Geno Smith had a rough day. He was under 50% completion rate. He was 13 of 28 for 157 yards and an interception. And as far as running the football, Seattle only got 28 yards on the ground. Kenneth Walker had 9 carries for 16 yards. Zach Charbonnet, 4 carries, 8 yards, and Geno Smith scrambled twice for 4 yards. Rough day. Baltimore, again, running the football, they had 298 yards on the ground as a team. Keaton Mitchell, again, 9 carries for 138 yards and a touchdown. And Lamar Jackson had 10 carries for 60 yards. Now, Gus Edwards, he found the end zone twice as well with 5 carries for 52 yards. And Justice Hill had 13 carries for 40 yards. So this team gobbled up. They were gobbling. They were getting over 5 yards per carry on the ground. And Seattle just was outmatched from the jump. As far as the receiving statistics go, tight end Mark Andrews, he led all receivers for Baltimore. He had 10 targets and had 9 catches for 80 yards. Odell Beckham Jr. actually found the end zone on 7 targets. He had 5 catches for 56 yards. And tight end Isaiah Likely had 4 catches for 42 yards. For Seattle, Jackson Smith-Njigba, he had 7 targets and he caught the ball 6 times for 63 yards. DK Metcalf was targeted 4 times but only had 1 catch for 50 yards. It was a 50-yard catch. And wide receiver Tyler Lockett on 8 targets caught the ball 3 times for 32 yards. Like I said, just a rough day all around for Seattle. This was very reminiscent of the butt kicking that Detroit got 2 weeks ago when they went to Baltimore. And I learned my lesson after that game. That's why I picked Baltimore to win this game this time, because Lamar Jackson is now 18-1 against the NFC. He does not lose to the NFC. So that was why I took Baltimore, because I learned my lesson after what Baltimore did to Detroit a couple weeks back. So huge game for Baltimore. Like I said, they sit atop the AFC at 7-2 alongside Kansas City. I still have Kansas City as the best team in the AFC until further notice, but Baltimore is right there. They have the same record. And, there's the thing that makes Baltimore scary is that there are games where Lamar Jackson doesn't do anything as far as scoring, but you get other guys involved. That's what's making this Baltimore team dangerous, is even if you do key in on Lamar Jackson, somebody else is hurting you somewhere else on the team. And again, this defense is top 3 in points and yardage this season. So that's another thing that's making this AFC North so crazy, is you have 3 really good defenses in Baltimore, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh this year. So huge win for the Ravens. The Seahawks, to me, this didn't eliminate them from anything, and it doesn't make them a bad team. Just like I said with Detroit, you just got your butts kicked. Playing in Baltimore is tough, especially as an NFC team, because NFC teams don't typically study the Baltimore Ravens. You're not going to see the Baltimore Ravens once every 4 years, depending on how the scheduling rotates. So Seattle, they prepared as much as they could for Baltimore, but you can't really prepare for a team like this. They're having a great season. So Baltimore, again, they're up to 7-2 as far as their record here. And looking at their schedule coming up here, this Sunday, they're home against the Cleveland Browns, November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before their Thursday nighter against Cincinnati, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on November 16th. I mentioned earlier in the schedule when I was talking about this game leading up to Sunday against Seattle that those 2 games after Seattle would be tough. Those are going to be tough because those are 2 AFC North battles in 5 days if you're the Baltimore Ravens. That's an owie, as they call it when you're a kid. I got an owie. They're at the Los Angeles Chargers November 26th for Sunday Night Football. That'll be taking place 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. They have a bye week after that before they're home against the Los Angeles Rams, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're at the Jacksonville Jaguars December 17th for Sunday Night Football, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. So the Baltimore Ravens, if they can make it through these next 2 games coming up Sunday and Thursday next week against Cleveland and Cincinnati, that'll kind of prove what they are. They don't face Kansas City head-to-head, so they won't have a way of beating Kansas City head-to-head to get the number 1 seed. But winning these games in your division is what's going to help for them. They've already beaten Cincinnati and Cleveland already once, but they lost to the Steelers. So they're sitting at 2-1 in their division. So if they win these next couple games, that'll put them at 4-1 with their division. And their last game in their division isn't until the end of the season, January 7th against Pittsburgh, which that's a ways away. So, like I said, if you're Baltimore, if you can get past Cleveland and get past Seattle these next couple games, you'll be sitting pretty in your division. There's no way you'll lose that division. So, the Baltimore Ravens, to me, like I said, they're the second best team in the AFC. And I genuinely am looking forward to Sunday against Cleveland. That's gonna be a slugfest. I'll have a prediction for you this Sunday as that game approaches, but AFC North games are going to be slugfests. Those are going to be heavyweight fights. Those are going to be Pier 6 brawls. There's just no way around that. That division is the toughest division in football this season, as far as I'm concerned. On the flip side, if you're the Seattle Seahawks, like I said, it's back to the drawing board. You're not out of it by any means, but that brief division lead that you had is gone because San Francisco is sitting with you at 5-3. So they haven't seen San Francisco yet head to head, but that'll change on Thanksgiving Day. Seattle is home against the Washington Commanders this Sunday, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before they're at the Los Angeles Rams, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. As I just mentioned, they're home against the San Francisco 49ers on Thanksgiving, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC, before traveling to Dallas to face the Cowboys November 30th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern. The date, or actually the network, is to be determined. 10 days later, they're at the San Francisco 49ers December 10th. That game is taking place 4:25 p.m. Eastern, or I'm sorry, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So the Seattle Seahawks got a nice, tough 5-game stretch here coming up, starting with Washington on Sunday. Washington, I wouldn't sleep on Washington. At the Rams, as I was discussing the Rams earlier, I could see Seattle taking that. But with San Francisco, Dallas, and San Francisco, those 3 games all in a row, that's really going to test what Seattle is too, because are they a wild card team or are they good enough to win this division over San Francisco? They're hanging with them at the moment, but we're just going to have to see more from them as far as what they're going to do. Like I said, they sit with San Francisco at 5-3. The Rams are 3-6, and the Arizona Cardinals sit at the bottom at 1-8. The next game we're going to talk about here, again, this is the last game that took place on the 1 o'clock slate this past Sunday. The Houston Texans hosted the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and won that game in a shootout. That game was a fantastic game to watch down the stretch. They won by a final of 39-37. Houston, CJ Stroud, he's the real deal. CJ Stroud definitely impressed me because not only did CJ Stroud take them on a last minute drive to win the game, but he passed for a rookie record 470 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's the type of stuff that gets your career off to the right start. He was 30 of 42, 470 yards, 5 touchdowns. So that's essentially almost 75% completion rate on top of that. So he was surgical. They only ran the ball for 53 yards on the ground, but when he's throwing the ball like that, you don't really need to run the ball that well. On the flip side for Tampa, Baker Mayfield was 21 of 30 for 265 yards and 2 touchdowns. Both of those touchdowns went to Cade Otton, who had 6 catches for 70 yards. Rachaad White, for running the football, had 20 carries for 73 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was responsible for pretty much all the football running on the ground for Tampa Bay. As far as receiving the ball, Houston, they had guys show out. They had 3 receivers go over 100 yards, which is amazing. Noah Brown had 6 catches for 153 yards and a touchdown. Tight end Dalton Schultz had 10 catches for 130 yards and a touchdown. And wide receiver Tank Dell, he had 6 catches for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is nuts. Again, they just went nuts on offense. Nico Collins himself, he had 3 catches for 54 yards and a touchdown as well. So CJ Stroud threw at least 1 touchdown to 4 different receivers. So not only was he efficient, but he spread the ball all over the field as he needed to. So that was a fantastic performance by him. As far as catching the football for Tampa, Mike Evans led their receivers with 4 catches for 87 yards, but didn't find the end zone. Again, that went to Cade Otton, the tight end. He had 6 catches for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. And running back Rachaad White had 4 catches for 46 yards out of the backfield on 4 targets. Chris Godwin, he was extremely quiet. He had 2 catches for 16 yards, but was targeted 6 times. So Mike Evans, he had a pretty solid day, but everybody else, it was just kind of just feast or famine as far as that team went. So Tampa Bay, they got some problems. They started out 3-1 and have now lost 4 straight games coming off the bye week. So they got some serious problems, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the crazy thing about that is they're still only a game and a half out of the division lead to the New Orleans Saints, but they were leading the division through the first quarter run of the season. So this is definitely not where they wanted to be as far as their results on this team. Looking at the Houston Texans, as I continue to say week after week, the Houston Texans are going to be in the mix because they're a scrappy team and they show fight every single week. They're never out of any game. So this was a fantastic win for them. And looking ahead to their schedule, with them sitting at 4-4, that AFC South is going to be very interesting. They sit at second place at 4-4, just a couple of games behind Jacksonville. Now they're a half a game ahead of Indianapolis and a full game ahead of Tennessee, who sits at 3-5 at the bottom of the division. So the AFC South is going to be much like the NFC South, very muddled, and we could only see one team come out of that division, and that would be the division winner as far as a playoff spot. So we'll have to see week to week here. Now, the Houston Texans are at Cincinnati this Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, before they host the Arizona Cardinals November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They then host the Jacksonville Jaguars November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. After that, they host the Denver Broncos December 3rd, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So after they travel to Cincinnati, they have 3 straight home games before they travel to the New York Jets December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So they'll get some home cooking after this Sunday on top of that. So I honestly think that they could get 3 wins over the next 5 weeks. The way Arizona looks, the way the Broncos are, and the Jets too, what I've seen from them, I think Houston could win those football games. At Cincinnati is going to be tough. It was tough on Buffalo this past Sunday night, so I don't expect it to be any easier for Houston. So I'm going to call that an L. I'll have an official prediction for you on Sunday before that game takes place, but I'm going to call that an L for Houston. If they can go into Cincinnati and take that, that'll be a sweet deal for sure. I just don't know if it'll happen because Cincinnati is starting to get themselves right and get themselves going as well. So that's going to be a tough game, but I could see Houston being 3-2 over the next 5 weeks. 3-2 is not out of the question for the way this team is looking. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like I said, they got some problems. How you going to solve them? I'm going to handle mine. They need to because they've lost 4 games in a row after starting out 3-1. And home against the Tennessee Titans this Sunday is not going to be a gimme either. Will Levis, he didn't look that great this past Thursday night against Pittsburgh, but that was only his second game as a starter. He's a rookie, and he's going to get better, I feel like. So that'll give Tennessee 10 days between the Thursday night game had and this game they got coming up on Sunday. So that could give Tennessee an advantage, even though Tampa Bay is hosting them. The following week, Tampa Bay is at the San Francisco 49ers, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox, November 19th. Then they're at the Indianapolis Colts, November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They then host the Carolina Panthers, December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, before traveling to Atlanta to face the Falcons, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So, they come home for Tennessee, and then they have a couple of games on the road at San Francisco and at Indy. I think those are going to be tough games for them. Tampa Bay, they need a win sooner than later because losing 4 games in the NFL is criminal. That's a quarter of your schedule, essentially. So they need all the help they can get. I personally will have a prediction for you on Sunday as far as Tennessee. Um, I'm leaning towards Tennessee, but again, we'll have to see. At San Francisco, I feel like that'll be a loss. So prognosticating as far as their schedule, I'm guessing they would be 2-3 over their next 5 games. I could see Carolina possibly being a victory, and at Atlanta. Those games are going to be the games that kick off December for them. Those could be victories, but it's hard to say because this team, again, after losing 4 in a row, 2 of those games were on the road and 2 of those games are at home. So I don't even think it has to do with where they are as geographically speaking. I think it's what it has to do with where they are as a team. So we'll just have to see if they can get it together. But Tampa Bay is not out of it, but a couple more games and you could be out of it. You definitely got to get it together sooner than later. On the next game we're going to talk about, this is the afternoon slate. There were 3 games that took place in the afternoon on Sunday. The first game we're going to talk about is the Indianapolis Colts traveling to face the Carolina Panthers. And the Indianapolis Colts actually escaped with a victory by a final of 27-13. When you hear a score of 27-13, it feels like a blowout, and it was 20-3 at the half. But the reason for that had to do with the defense. Kenny Moore for the Indianapolis Colts, he had not 1 but 2 pick sixes off of Bryce Young. Bryce Young threw 3 interceptions in total as a team. But Kenny Moore, the second, he got 2 pick sixes off of him. The cornerback here, who was in his 7th season out of Valdosta State. He ate that day. He hadn't really done much early in the season, but when you have a rookie quarterback out there, these things could happen. So credit the Colts defense. They got 14 points of those 27 for him. Gardner Minshew was all right, but he didn't really have to do much when the defense did what they did in the second quarter. Gardner Minshew was 17-26 for 127 yards and 1 touchdown. He didn't turn the ball over, and he also ran the ball 5 times for 5 yards. The Colts actually only had 78 yards on the ground as a team with that 127 yards. So they only generated just over 200 yards of offense as a team. But again, when you get 2 defensive touchdowns in the second quarter, that doesn't matter. That seals the deal. Bryce Young, again, he was 24 of 39 for 173 yards, and he did throw a touchdown to DJ Chark, a 5-yard touchdown, but he threw 3 interceptions on the day. For running the football, Carolina had 138 yards as a team. Chuba Hubbard, he had 16 catches for 58 yards, but didn't find the end zone. Miles Sanders, 6 carries for 39 yards, and Bryce Young, 5 carries for 41 yards. As far as receiving the football, that wasn't that great of a day for Carolina either. Hayden Hurst, the tight end, was targeted 4 times and had 2 catches for 54 yards. Adam Thielen, the wide receiver, he had 6 targets and caught 5 of them for 29 yards, but didn't find the end zone. And Stephen Sullivan had 4 catches for 28 yards as well on 5 targets. For Indianapolis, wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr., he actually had 8 catches for 64 yards, but didn't find the end zone. And Jonathan Taylor, the running back, he also had 5 catches for 22 yards and did score a touchdown that way. So he ended up with 69 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. But again, the defensive efforts of the Colts is what got them the victory in this game. And to be honest with you, there's never been a time where the Colts defense, not that I can think of, where the Colts defense is what got them the victory. But here we are here. The Panthers fall to 1-7 on the season here, and they sit at the bottom of the NFC South. With the Indianapolis Colts, like I said, they moved to 4-5, but they still sit at 3rd in their division. They're just a half game behind Houston. I'm looking ahead to their schedule. They're traveling to Germany to face the Patriots in Frankfurt, Germany this Sunday. That game will be at 9:30 a.m. Eastern on the NFL Network. They head into their bye week after that before hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That game will be on November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're at the Tennessee Titans December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're at the Cincinnati Bengals December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, before hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers on December 17th. The time and network are to be determined. So the Colts, they could win this Sunday against the Patriots. They could win this game because, like I said, the Patriots are just not a good football team. I don't see how Indy loses that game. But after that bye week with Tampa Bay, Tennessee, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh, that's where things are going to get a little tougher. I could see them beating Tampa and maybe Tennessee because they're at Tennessee and they already got the victory over them earlier in the season. So Tennessee, the divisional games are tougher to call. They really are. But I could see them being 3-2 over the next 5 weeks. The Cincinnati game and the Pittsburgh games in December are going to be tougher. So I'll have a better result for you at that time, or a better prediction as to what they're going to do. But those games are going to be tougher heading into December, mid-December. So, again, I can see the Colts being 3-2 over the course of the next 5 games. 3-2. The next game we're going to talk about here, the Las Vegas Raiders here, fresh off of firing their head coach, Josh McDaniels, their GM, Dave Ziegler, and their offensive coordinator as well. They stomped the Giants and win with a victory of 30-6 to get themselves back on the winning side of things. They had lost their last couple of games to the Chicago and Detroit. And again, this game taking place, after Josh McDaniels was fired by the team. This team just showed a different type of fight, in my opinion. Excuse me. This team showed a different type of fight, in my opinion. And on top of that, they just had a different feel to them. There was just something different about this team that they just didn't have when Josh McDaniels was there. Josh McDaniels, to me, I feel like he hinders people more than he helps them. And he uses the reputation of other people to make himself seem greater than what he really is. That's been exposed more than enough times now. And people should understand what they're going to get with Josh McDaniels as your coach. He's not going to be the guy. As far as the Raiders go, I genuinely could see Antonio Pierce holding on to this job, especially if they get another couple wins. I'm not sure where the wins will come, but this was the New York Giants, so that's why I don't put too much stock into it. The Giants are having problems of their own. But if for example, the Raiders, they host the New York Jets for Sunday Night Football this Sunday coming up at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. Then they're at Miami 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. For example, if you can get a couple of wins off those teams, then you're right back in the mix. You're right back in the mix, and you're in the mix for a wild card spot. But if they continue losing, then they're probably going to have to look ahead to next year. Antonio Pierce, if he can win a few games, I could see him being the coach because he has the pedigree. I just see them being a team that they made a mistake with not hiring Rich Bisaccia, who took over for John Gruden a couple seasons ago after 2021 season and the way things went there. So I don't think they're going to make that mistake again. Hiring John Gruden and then what went down with that, they just didn't see themselves making another mistake. And it's crazy to me now that John Gruden was 3 coaches ago. That was just in 2021 that he resigned from that position. They've had 3 head coaches now since John Gruden. That's the Raiders for you, though. Again, they're hosting the New York Jets for Sunday Night Football. The following week they're at the Miami Dolphins November 19th. Then they host the Kansas City Chiefs November 26th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They then have a bye week, and then they host the Minnesota Vikings 4:05 p.m. Eastern December 10th on Fox. 4 days later, they host the Los Angeles Chargers. That game is on December 14th for Thursday Night Football, and that'll be on Prime Video, 8:15 p.m. Eastern. So, again, circling back around here with the Raiders, I just don't see a situation with what they're going to do because of this reset. I don't know what they are yet. So, on a week-to-week basis, that's how I'm going to have to take the Raiders. I still don't know if they can beat Miami or Kansas City after this Jets game coming up Sunday. But on a week-to-week basis, we're going to have to see what they're going to be and what they're going to become. I'm going to take them on a week-to-week basis. But this was definitely a good victory for the Raiders to get them back on the winning side of things. And the Giants, their season is just done. Daniel Jones, as I stated, he's out with a torn ACL, so you will not see him again for the rest of the season. And I don't expect them to beat Dallas on Sunday. They're at Dallas on Sunday, 4:25 p.m. Eastern. Then they're at Washington November 19th. Yeah, their season is over. With all the games they have left in their season, I could see them winning maybe two games. And that's unfortunate, especially for somebody like Saquon Barkley. If I'm Saquon Barkley, I would strongly consider possibly going somewhere else because I don't see this team getting any better. And Daniel Jones, he doesn't have any trade value, especially with that contract he's getting. He's getting $40 million. A lot of teams don't see him as that type of quarterback. You've lost 6 of your last 7 games, and it's just hard to say where the wins are going to come from. So if you're the Giants, it's just pretty much a done deal at this point. The next game we're talking about, that's the last game we're going to talk about actually for the afternoon slate before we get into the Sunday Night Football matchup and then the Monday Night Football matchup to close out the show. The Philadelphia Eagles hosted the Dallas Cowboys, and they were able to squeeze out the victory by a final score of 28-23. This game actually did come down to the wire. The Dallas Cowboys, they were driving late and did have a chance to win. And Dak Prescott, he completed a pass to CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver, but it was about 5 yards short of the end zone, and the defenders were able to keep him out of the end zone and seal the victory. So this game definitely came down to the final moments, and despite the Eagles getting the victory, Dallas did play pretty good. I'll definitely give it to Dallas here. The Eagles improved to 8-1 heading into their bye week, and the Dallas Cowboys unfortunately fall to 5-3 in the division here. So they're in the division 2.5 games out. with Washington at 4-5, and the Giants, as we talked about, sitting at 2-7. Jalen Hurts, he was 17 of 23 for 207 yards and 2 touchdowns, and also rushed the ball 10 times for 36 yards and a touchdown as well. So he had 3 total touchdowns on the day. Dak Prescott had a fantastic game, in my opinion. He was 29 of 44 for 374 yards and 3 touchdowns. He carried the ball 6 times for 14 yards as well. So he didn't turn the ball over. He did have a fumble, but he was able to get the fumble back, so he didn't go to the other team. And he didn't turn the ball over. That's always kind of been a worry with Dak Prescott as to what he's going to do with the football. So great game by Dak, but they just were unable to get the victory. As Philadelphia improved to 4-0 at home. Running the football was pretty balanced between both teams. Philadelphia was able to get 109 yards on the ground to Dallas' 73. DeAndre Swift carried the ball 18 times for 43 yards, but didn't find the end zone. That went to Jalen Hurts, as I just mentioned, and Kenneth Gainwell. He had 3 carries for 22 yards and a touchdown as well. For Dallas, Tony Pollard had 12 carries for 51 yards and also had 3 catches for 12 yards. Rico Dowdle came in with 2 carries for 8 yards. So, again, they didn't really do much on the ground. CeeDee Lamb was the leading receiver for each team. He had 11 catches for 191 yards but didn't find the end zone. Tight end Jake Ferguson had 7 catches on 10 targets for 91 yards and a touchdown. And running back Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver Jalen Tolbert had 3 catches for 49 yards and a touchdown as well. On the receiving end for Philadelphia, A.J. Brown had 7 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown. And wide receiver Devontae Smith, he had 3 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown as well. Tight end Dallas Goedert, he had 3 catches for 51 yards but didn't find the end zone. He actually had to leave the game here. And on Monday, they revealed that he has a fractured right forearm. He did leave the game with that injury, and he's likely going to be out 4 to 5 weeks between recovery and rehabilitation on that arm. So he's going to be out with that fracture in his arm. I did see that play when he caught the ball and went down. The way that he was tackled, that Dallas defender kind of pulled on his arm kind of weird as he was tackling. I thought that was a strange play too. So he did go out with that injury, and he is going to miss some time here for Philly. So definitely a huge blow to them, but like I said, they're heading into a bye week before their next 4 games, so that'll help out a little as far as the timing of the bye week. But the schedule after that here, looking at Philadelphia, we'll have to see what they're going to be doing and what they could do as far as wins. To me, the Dallas Cowboys, we'll have to see. They're not out of anything by any means. Because the only thing they'd really be out of is winning the division right now, because the tiebreaker is going to go to Philly, obviously, with that win. And with Dallas, they won't see them again for another 4 weeks. So we'll just have to see at that time in December what happens with Philadelphia and Dallas. Like I said, Philadelphia has a bye next weekend, so they don't play. They're at the Kansas City Chiefs for Monday Night Football on November 20th. Before traveling to Buffalo they're hosting the Buffalo Bills November 26th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they host the San Francisco 49ers December 3rd, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. That's going to be good. They're at the Dallas Cowboys December 10th for Sunday Night Football. And then they're at the Seattle Seahawks December 17th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So, yeah, the Philadelphia Eagles, hopefully Jalen Hurts' knee is doing better by that time. He did have a little bit of issue with that knee, and he toughed his way through it. But if they can get anything as far as rehabilitation and treatment and get that knee back right for the Kansas City game, that'll be much needed. And with next week with them having a bye this coming weekend, and then with the next game being a Monday night game, that gives them an additional day to get him right. So that's going to be a great game there in about a couple weeks. November 20th, put that on your calendar. The Chiefs and Eagles in a Super Bowl rematch. That one's going to be fun. Home against Buffalo, Philadelphia and Buffalo, that's going to be a good one too. That's going to be a really good one, because Buffalo, they're fighting for a shot too in the AFC. Then they're home against the San Francisco 49ers the week after that. Then they're at Dallas. Then they're at the Seattle Seahawks. Philadelphia, if they can win these next 5 games after their bye week, that'll truly prove that they're a good team. That'll truly, without a shadow of a doubt, prove that they're the best team. Because after that Seattle game, they got the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Giants to end the season. That's wins. Those are wins. Those are wins. I could see Philadelphia losing 2 more games realistically. I think they'll lose 2 more games. That would still put them at 14-3 and then possibly have the 1 seed, probably. They'll probably have the 1 seed because San Francisco already has 3 losses now. So I don't know, man. Philadelphia, ooh, they're looking mean. They're looking like they want to crush again. They want to get back to that Super Bowl. So after the bye week, I'll have a prediction for you once the Eagles get to playing again. But the Eagles are sitting pretty. The Dallas Cowboys, looking at their schedule, I don't know. I can't even see the schedule, and I bet you it's a home game against somebody weak. Yeah, they're home against the New York Giants on Sunday, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. I called that. I called that like my grandma back in the day. I guarantee you that Dallas blows the Giants out. Blows them out. The Giants are going to be using Tommy DeVito at wide receiver. That's a win. Then they're at Carolina. That's a win. They're hosting the Washington Commanders on Thanksgiving. I won't have a prediction for you on that one yet, but I know the Dallas Cowboys are going to at least win their next 2 games because, as I've stated already and as we've seen, the Dallas Cowboys beat the teams that aren't very good. The teams that aren't very good, that are average to terrible, the Cowboys beat up on those teams. So that's what I expect to happen. So over the next 5 weeks, I expect the Dallas Cowboys to probably be 4-1 because we're going to have to see what happens when they face Philadelphia December 10th. We'll have a prediction for that as we get closer. But over these next 5 games, if Dallas goes 4-1, that's not going to shock anybody. It's really not going to shock anybody. But as far as the Cowboys go as a whole, they're not out of it. They may not win the division, but they're still one of the better teams in the NFC, and I still think they'll get a playoff spot, barring like catastrophic injury to somebody. So Dallas, they still got another chance to prove that they can beat Philadelphia. It just won't happen for another 5 weeks, and a lot can happen in 5 weeks. So Philadelphia is the best team for now in the NFC to me, but we have to see what's going to happen over the next few weeks here because like I say, week to week things happen. We have 2 more games to talk about here. The Sunday night football matchup here. The Cincinnati Bengals hosted the Buffalo Bills, and they got the victory by a final of 24-18. The Cincinnati Bengals were able to defeat the Bills. And this game for me, a couple of things to point out here. The Bengals, they're looking good again. They started out kind of tough, but they're definitely starting to bounce back. And I mentioned that in a prior broadcast that I felt like this team was going to have a situation where they started out 1-2, but they were able to find a way to get things right and bounce back later. And that's precisely what's happening here. The Bengals still technically sit in last place in their division at 5-3. But the AFC North is the best division in football right now. And if the playoffs were to start today, they would have a playoff spot, and the Buffalo Bills would be on the outside looking in. They would be ninth in the AFC right now. The Bills, unfortunately, fall to 5-4. And to me, this was a game, where Joe Burrow is looking like the guy that we saw over the last couple seasons. He's looking fully back from that calf injury. He was 31-44 for 348 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Josh Allen, conversely, was 26-38 for 258 yards with a touchdown and an interception, and also carries the ball 8 times for 44 yards and a touchdown. Josh Allen, he had 44 of the Bills' 68 yards on the ground, so he was pretty much their rushing attack too. Cincinnati only had 54 yards on the ground as well, with Joe Mixon rushing the ball 14 carries for 37 yards and a touchdown, and also had 5 catches for 31 yards as well. As far as the receiving statistics here for Cincinnati, T. Higgins led the way with 8 catches for 110 yards but didn't find the end zone. Tyler Boyd had 3 catches for 56 yards. He didn't find the end zone either. And Jamar Chase, he was targeted 8 times but had 4 catches for 41 yards before actually leaving the game with a back injury. He's listed as day-to-day. They may not have him available for Sunday's game. They're taking it on a day-by-day basis here, but for the Cincinnati Bengals, they may not have him available for Sunday's game against the Houston Texans. So that could be a big deal. We'll just have to take it on a day-by-day basis and see if he's available for Sunday's game. So I'll hold off on predicting Cincinnati and what they're going to do against Houston on Sunday until we have an official idea of if Chase is available or not. The Cincinnati Bengals, they turn around 4 days later and they're at Baltimore for a Thursday night matchup, as I stated earlier in the broadcast. So that's going to be tough. And then the Bengals are home against Pittsburgh 10 days later, November 26th on CBS. They're at Jacksonville for Monday Night Football, and that game is taking place December 4th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern. Then 6 days later, they're home against the Indianapolis Colts, December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So Sunday's game is a little more in the air. If they don't have Ja'Marr Chase, that's going to make things very difficult for them. So we'll just have to see with Cincinnati. Cincinnati is getting their groove back, though. Cincinnati is getting their groove back at the right time. They do have some tough games coming up here, but Cincinnati, I stated that they would be in a situation where they lost 1-2, or 1-2, maybe even 1-3, and they would start to right the ship, and that's exactly what we're seeing with the Cincinnati Bengals here. On the flip side, for Buffalo, I just find myself incredibly confused as to what they are. And the reason why is because for the last few years, we've had them as a Super Bowl team and as a contender. But after this season, I just think that may go away because they're starting to get injuries on defense every year now, and players are getting older. They really only have one good wide receiver to me in Stephon Diggs, because Gabe Davis, he didn't have any catches this past game here against Cincinnati. And with Gabe Davis, he can give you those games where he has 5 catches for like 106 yards, but 60 of those yards came on one play. And so for the other 4 catches, he only had 46 yards, really. So that's the type of player Gabe Davis is. He either has big plays or he has games where he just doesn't do anything. He's kind of like Rashid Shaheed of the New Orleans Saints. He has games like that too. He'll have 3 catches for like 140 yards, and then the next game he'll have 2 catches for 26 yards. There's just not a lot of consistency behind Stephon Diggs at the wide receiver position for the Buffalo Bills. Khalil Shakir is fair, and Deontay Hardy is okay, but Stephon Diggs is easily their best wide receiver. And Josh Allen, he does so much for this team, but there's points where he can be careless with the football and turn the football over. And so if you're the Buffalo Bills, you're not out of it, but at the same time, there's a situation where you're just not showing that you're one of the top teams in the conference either. So that's the issue that the Bills are having. For me, looking ahead with Cincinnati and their scheduling here, I'm going to have more of a prediction for you as far as what the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be, because if Ja'Marr Chase is out Sunday, that'll affect what they do against Houston. And on the flip side for Buffalo, I think they get things right Monday night as they host the Denver Broncos for Monday Night Football. That's November 13th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. The Broncos are coming off of a bye week, so that might have them kind of fresh. So I wouldn't sleep on them if I were Buffalo, but I'll have an official prediction for you on Sunday for that game. But I could see Buffalo winning that game in a close one. Denver might make it interesting. They're hosting the Jets that following week at 4:25 p.m. Eastern, November 19th on CBS, before they travel to Philadelphia, November 26th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They have a bye week after that, and then the following week, week 14, they are at the Kansas City Chiefs, December 10th. That game is taking place 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So, that following week, the Buffalo Bills host the Dallas Cowboys December 17th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So after Denver and after the Jets, they have a nice 3-game gauntlet that they're going to enter with Philly, Kansas City, and Dallas all in a row. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what's going to prove whether or not that you're a contender or not. Because Philadelphia and Dallas, those are potential Super Bowl teams. And with Kansas City, that's potentially one of the top teams, if not the top team in the AFC when the playoffs start. So if you want to prove you're worth anything, you got to do it against those teams. So for me, I think Buffalo along the way over the last year or so became more of a story because of what happened with Damar Hamlin, unfortunately, last season against the Cincinnati Bengals. But now that story is kind of worn off a bit, this team is starting to get exposed as having a lot of holes in it, and they just may not be as strong as we've seen or have indicated them to be. So with the Buffalo Bills, I just don't know what they're going to be, and it's just going to take some more proof from them as to whether or not they're really one of those teams in the AFC that can be reckoned with here. The last game we're going to talk about here before we close things out was the Monday Night Football matchup with the Los Angeles Chargers traveling to visit the New York Jets. The Chargers were able to take care of things and get things done by a final score of 27-6, improving their record to 4-4. The Jets unfortunately fall to 4-4, and they're now 2-3 at home. The Los Angeles Chargers, they got contribution from special teams and defense for this game because Justin Herbert wasn't that great. He was 16 of 30 for 136 yards. He actually didn't throw any touchdowns, but he didn't have any interceptions either. This was more of a game where they ran the football and kind of just kept the clock moving because Austin Ekeler, he had 14 carries for 47 yards and 2 touchdowns, and also had 2 catches for 23 yards. So he only had 70 yards from scrimmage. This game was more about contribution from other parts of the team and other sides on the other side of the ball here because Zach Wilson was 33 of 49 for 263 yards. If you were just looking at the stat sheet and you didn't look at the score, you would think that Zach Wilson got the victory because he almost doubled Justin Herbert in passing yards and he doubled him in completions. But the Los Angeles Chargers, got the win. Breece Hall had 16 carries for 50 yards, and he also had 4 catches for 10 yards. Dalvin Cook, 2 carries for 7 yards. He's not having that great of a time with the Jets. This isn't what he's used to. We're used to seeing more production from Dalvin Cook from when he's with the Minnesota Vikings, and it's just not working with the Jets. I'm not sure what they can do with that, but they were hoping to have a 1-2 punch from the running back position with Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook, and they're just not getting that, unfortunately. As far as the receiving statistics here, New York, they led that as well, looking at the stat sheet. Garrett Wilson had 7 catches for 80 yards on 13 targets. Tight end Tyler Conklin had 6 catches for 66 yards, and running back Michael Carter actually had 6 catches for 24 yards. For Los Angeles, wide receiver Keenan Allen had 8 catches for 77 yards, and running back Austin Ekeler had 2 catches for 23 yards, as I just mentioned. So this wasn't a game where Justin Herbert does what he normally does, where he gets it to multiple receivers to hurt you. Keenan Allen was his guy pretty much the entire game, and that doesn't really surprise me. It's just that nobody else on the team had more than 2 catches. So Keenan Allen, that's pretty much all you really needed to do. Like I said, they got a touchdown on defense, and they got a touchdown on the punt return from Darius Davis. That was actually how they got their first score in the game in the first quarter. And they led the game at halftime 17-3. So it was never close as far as I'm concerned. The Los Angeles Chargers, again, they improved to 4-4. They sit at second place in the division behind Kansas City, who was 7-2. They're a half game up on the Las Vegas Raiders at 4-5, and a full game up on the Denver Broncos at 3-5, who had a bye week this week. The Chargers, looking at their schedule, this is the thing about the Chargers. They're very up and down, and so I don't know who's going to do what. With them playing against the Bears and the Jets, those were expected to be victories. But when you're home against the Detroit Lions this coming Sunday, what are you going to do? That game is at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they travel to Green Bay November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before hosting the Baltimore Ravens November 26th at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. They're then at New England December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before hosting the Denver Broncos 4:25 p.m. Eastern on December the 10th. So Detroit and Baltimore are definitely going to be tough games. Green Bay, New England, and Denver, probably not. Even though they're at Green Bay, I can still see them coming out with a win. But we'll just have to see. Because Green Bay's offense, they came to life a little bit, but they're still not that great of an offensive football team. So the Los Angeles Chargers, if they can go at worst 3-2 over the next 5 games, that'll somewhat keep them in pace with Kansas City, because they don't see Kansas City until the final game of the season, week 18 on January the 7th. So they already lost to Kansas City a couple of weeks ago, so they won't see them again until the end of the year. So if you're the Los Angeles Chargers, all you can do is win football games, because they have Denver. They still haven't played Denver yet, so they have Denver twice. They have one more matchup with the Raiders, and then the game at the end with the Chiefs. So they're 1-1 in their division. So if you're the Los Angeles Chargers, all you can do is win football games. Starting out 0-2 and then winning 2 games. They lost 2 games and then they won 2 games. They haven't shown any real consistency. They've lost 2 in a row, won 2 in a row. Lost 2 in a row, won 2 in a row. Now it's about stringing these wins together. if you can get wins again against Detroit and against Green Bay, that'll keep you in the mix as far as the conference goes. Do I think the Chargers can get in as a playoff team? We'll have to see. We'll honestly have to see if they can really be those guys because, like I said, Kansas City may end up being the only team from the AFC West that gets a playoff spot, and it's because they win the division. With how tough the AFC North is, that's really imperative that these teams in these other divisions win football games that can't win their division, and the Chargers definitely fall into that category. So we'll have to see if they can go 3-2 at worst over 5 games. I think that'll keep them in the hunt, but anything worse than that, they'll start to fade. Plain and simple. On the flip side for the Jets, there's talk about Aaron Rodgers wanting to come back in a few weeks. I just don't know. With an Achilles tendon injury, we see him throwing the ball. We see him, participating in pregame throws. We see him walking around with no crutches now. So we can't say how he feels, but just according to history and according to what we've seen over the years, when you tear an Achilles tendon, you're down for at least a year. This man is up and walking after 8-9 weeks. I don't know anything about a torn Achilles, but I do know that that's kind of crazy. So with the Jets here, they're at the Las Vegas Raiders, for Sunday Night Football, November 12th on ABC. They're then at the Buffalo Bills on CBS November 19th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. Again, they have a game on Black Friday against the Miami Dolphins, 1 p.m. or 3 p.m. Eastern, November 24th. They then host the Atlanta Falcons December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, and they then host the Houston Texans after that, December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So naturally, with the Jets, it's hard to prognosticate what they're going to be. With this reinvigorated Raiders team that we're seeing here, can they come in and steal one and take it from the Jets, or can the Jets go in there and do what they need to do? Based on what I'm seeing, that game is a pick-em with the Jets and Raiders. Still, to me, even with everything the Raiders have gone through and what the Jets have done over the last few weeks, that still feels like a pick-em. So I'll have a prediction for you Sunday. I don't see them winning at Buffalo, even though they got the victory to start the season. That was under weird circumstances. But I don't see them beating Buffalo. I think they'll split with Buffalo over the season. And then with Miami, they haven't played Miami yet. So that's going to be tough. Black Friday, that's going to be the only game of the day. So I'll definitely be focused on that game when it comes. But it's hard to say. I can honestly see that being a situation where Miami takes that. But if you're the Jets, if you can go 3-2, 4-1, optimistically, I don't know if they'll do that. But if you can do that over the course of these next 5 weeks, that'll keep you in pace with Miami and Buffalo. But I still think it'll be just outside of a playoff spot. Because like I said, that AFC North is tough. And all those teams have 5 or more wins already. So if you're the Jets, just keep on trucking. You took this L to the Chargers, but keep on trucking. You haven't lost it a few weeks, and you gained some sort of positive attitude in the building. I honestly think even with Aaron Rodgers not playing and with him still being around, I still think that creates an atmosphere for positive thinking in that building. So that's what that's looking like for the Jets. And for the Chargers, keeping paces with the Chiefs is what they're going to have to do. The Chargers and Jets are both kind of in similar positions regarding the conference as a whole. I don't see either one of these teams winning their division, but if they want a playoff spot, they got to keep winning football games here. So that wraps up the schedule for the NFL for Week 9. Those are all the games for Week 9 here. Week 10, we'll be discussing that more a little bit on Thursday, and then I'll have predictions for you coming up the following Sunday here. The Thursday night football matchup coming up here this Thursday to kick off Week 10 is the Carolina Panthers at the Chicago Bears. That game is taking place this Thursday, November 9th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video. Again, if you live in the North Carolina or Chicago area, you can get that game locally, and you'll be able to watch that football game. And for Week 10, the teams that aren't playing this coming weekend are the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Rams, the Miami Dolphins, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Those 4 teams have a bye week this coming week. So like I said, this Thursday, I'll have a prediction for you for the Thursday game coming up. I'll also have a prediction for you for the game on Sunday morning, taking place on Frankfurt, Germany, to kick off Week 10 as well. That's an international matchup between the Indianapolis Colts and the New England Patriots. So I'll be discussing both of those football games on Thursday, and we'll touch a little bit on the NBA and kind of go over the schedule for that as well, and just kind of do an up-in and see how teams are going here for you. Thank you so much here for joining me. This has been another episode of The Hype Show. I do appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe here. We do appreciate all the subscriptions we can get. And if you're not new, thank you again for joining me for another episode. I do appreciate it very much here. Again, I will talk to you on Thursday afternoon for an abbreviated episode to go over those 2 games that we got coming up. And then on Sunday, I'll give you all of my predictions for how I think Week 10 is going to go for you. Thank you so much here. This has been The Hype Show. You have a great rest of your night, and I will talk to you on Thursday.